The topics, views, and opinions expressed on the air and via All Igniting Change with Barbara Arnwine, platforms by host Barbara Arnwine Esquire, guests, and supporters are their own and are independent of any organization, entity. Nothing said on the show or any of its platforms constitutes a client-attorney relationship or serves as legal advice counsel. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to Igniting Change, its platforms, or the show's host. It's time now for Igniting Change, a weekly provocative and empowering program where you, the listener, can ignite change. Now here's your host, Barbara Arnwine.
Get up, stand up.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Igniting Change. Oh, we got a great show for you today because we are going to be talking about this post-election reality. We're going to be talking about election outcomes and consequences. Oh, we got a big show. We're going to have, so many great guests who are going to join us. Before I get to that, however, I got to bring up my mighty co-host. One of the most brilliant attorneys in this nation and world, one of the most profound, bold advocates you're going to find out there, one of the most strategic, innovative, creative people I'm talking about none other than the chair of the board of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Darrell D. Jones, Esquire. Hey, Darrell.
Hey, Barbara, it's Tuesday. It must be noon Eastern Standard Time because we're talking about Igniting Change and Igniting Change Radio. Barbara, this is our first radio show post the election of November the 5th, and my goodness, what an election day it was. What an incredible effort that was done by the Transformative Justice Coalition and the National Bar Association as we sought to fight to protect voting rights across this country. Barbara, we have such an incredible show to talk about today, what happened as a result of the election, where we stand as a result of the election, where we're going as a result of this election. Because, Barbara, as you know, and you always say, you didn't lose the war. You just got a little setback perhaps from the battle. The war is still going forward, and we're going to continue pushing forward and fighting, Barbara.
Absolutely, and the issue always is how do we rally our troops? How do we best win? Come on, folks, we got a battle ahead of us, and we got to be ready for it. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this mighty command center structure and all the good things that happened. Then Darrell and I are going to share with you our reflections, our thoughts on the overall election and what it means for us moving forward. Then we're going to talk about, sadly, the rising incidence of hate crimes that we're already seeing in the wake of this election as MAGA forces feeling, so much white supremacy are just terrorizing black folks and others. So we're going to talk about this and about what do we do about it. So we have a full show, and let us get started. Darrell, the command center, we had over, I would say over 100 lawyers, and we had about 30 law students who helped us throughout the country in making sure that voters' rights were protected on Election Day. But what people don't know, because all the media coverage is only about who won, who lost, and a whole lot of speculation as to what happened, whatever, people have not really heard precisely what we found and what it says to us about future elections and how we must make sure that our electoral system works. Right, Darrell? So why don't we start by talking about what you saw in the mighty Atlanta Command Center?
Well, Barbara, that's a great question. One of the things that was really clear, the Atlanta Command Center was our Georgia Command Center, so we had the entire state of Georgia that we were concentrating on, and we operated out of the office of Attorney C.K. Hoffler, who is one of the just one of the most well-known and respected black attorneys in the country, whose office is based in the state of Georgia in Atlanta. And one of the things that we got a chance to see were a lot of the issues that had to be overcome, a lot of the barriers that were put up for voters to be able to get to the polls. In the state of Georgia, for instance, there were eight bomb threats at polling places, where they had to evacuate the polling places and put the notice out about what's going on. That has a tremendous impact on voters who are trying to, exercise their right to vote, the intimidation aspect of it, as well as the timing aspect of it, because it happened during high points that these bomb threats occurred. And so the question became, do I go to work? Do I get in line? Those types of issues. We also had a chance, Barbara, to experience in Camilla, Georgia, where there was, and this is not being partisan, just being factual, where there was an incredible large threat of Trump voters that had put themselves around the city hall, around one of the voting precincts, and were intimidating voters and scaring voters with regards to whether or not they were going to be able to cast their ballots, whether or not they wanted to go through and around this mob to cast their ballots. With the mob, threatening the mayor there in Camilla that they were going to arrest them and hang them, and all of this that was going on. So there were a lot of challenges in the state of Georgia that were going on all across the state, and that's just to touch just a few. We're not even going to talk about what they tried to do to the students at Morehouse, as they were trying to register to vote, and then learning on Election Day that they weren't registered, and no one ever reached out to them to tell them what needed to be done to correct it. And now, because Georgia was not a same-day registration state, those students couldn't vote. Those are the types of issues, Barbara, that we saw going on all around the state of Georgia.
Wow. I want to pick up on one thing that you mentioned, the bomb threats. Folks, this is not rumor. This is not a hoax. This is not some made-up conspiracy. It actually happened, so much so that the Georgia Secretary of State Elections had to go on TV and to speak about what they knew about the bomb threats, because it disrupted their election polling sites, and they basically said that these bomb threats came from Russia. It turns out, folks, these bomb threats weren't only in Georgia; they were also in Florida. And let's be very clear: the bomb threats were against polling sites that had large African American population, and they also were at Native American polling sites, because we found out that there were bomb threats also in Arizona, where you had a heavy Native American polling site. There were bomb threats in several states. So we want this to be clear that this needs to be run to the ground. It needs to be investigated thoroughly. They said that the Secretary of State from Georgia said it was that these were Russians, that these threats were coming from Russia, and that they were clearly meant to disrupt us and to help one campaign versus the other. I think, Daryl, that this is one of those post-election investigations that is critical, right?
Oh, absolutely, Barbara. And, it becomes really interesting because when we start talking about doing the post-election investigation, the question is, who leads the investigation? Does the Attorney General of the winning president now lead the investigation into what has happened in these elections? Do they lead the investigation with regards to whether or not there was Russian interference in the election process? These are some of the questions that have got to be raised. And most importantly, Barbara, one of the things we know in the African American community is that we cannot give off to somebody else the responsibility of protecting us. We've got to take those steps to protect ourselves, and that's where the National Bar Association showed itself throughout this process for this election, and the steps that we will be taking to be certain that our voting rights are protected, as well as a fair investigation occurs.
And the other thing we saw, because we had a command center everybody in Milwaukee. That covered the states of Nevada. Also covered, the state of Wisconsin and the states of Michigan. And we saw, so many reports of, just all kinds of problems. The one thing we saw throughout the country, because I headed up the National Command Center, which covered the entire nation. And what we saw throughout the country were a lot of machine failures, right? We had, massive failures in New York. We had some failures in Michigan. We had failures of machines around the nation where they just didn't function. They weren't working. Mm-hmm. They weren't, allowing people to record their votes. These were massive problems. They caused a lot of polling places to be closed and shut down. They ran out of ballots again, Daryl. We had those reports of, running out of ballots, all these things that have happened in the past, and these darn election boards aren't on top of it. They just don't learn from one election to the other. They just choose not to be prepared for voter turnout. The other thing we saw that I wanted to make sure that people heard about is that we dealt with a Mississippi polling site that actually, instead of giving out provisional ballots to people, a provisional ballot, folks, is a ballot that you give to someone who you have a question about whether or not they're actually, effectively registered, or you think that, something's wrong with their voter registration. In this one particular polling site in the heart of a black community, they literally told people who had problems, instead of giving them the provisional ballot, they told those people to go home and come back on Wednesday and vote. Folks, what's wrong with that? Come on, everybody listening. You know what's wrong about that, right, Daryl? Let's say it together. There is no Wednesday
no voting on Wednesday. That's right. And Barbara, it's just amazing because, Barbara, in the instance that you're lifting up, but for that young voter's mother calling you.
Right. There you go.
She would not have had that. Barbara, you got to tell the end of that story. What happened with that young voter that was told she couldn't vote?
Oh, it was crazy. So her mom called and said, this just doesn't sound right. She called our, 833 TJC vote hotline, and she said, it just doesn't sound right, Miss Arnwine. It just doesn't sound right to me. I don't know about this. I never heard of people going back and voting again on Wednesday. And so we said, of course, that's wrong. That's illegal. Okay, she's about to be denied her right to vote. This is horrible. Where is she? And her mom said, I think she's still right out at the parking lot near the polling place. I said, well, let's get her on the line. And we did. And we told her, go back. She had 15 minutes, everybody, 15 minutes to the polling site closing. We said, go back immediately and tell them to let you vote. And if they won't give you a regular ballot, you tell them to give you a provisional ballot. And the young woman was obedient to her mom, and she said, okay, I'll go. But they were, insistent, and we said, don't matter. It doesn't matter. Just go there. Go back. Went back, and when she got in line and she told them why she was back there, they apologized to her people. Do you hear me? The guy who was running the line at that point apologized, said, oh, my goodness, of course you can't vote on Wednesday. I can't believe you were told that, because they knew, that she, of course, said, my lawyers told me, that you can't vote on Wednesday. And he said, of course, you can't. And come here. And they actually looked up the problem, which was that they thought she was her mother. And was forgetting and was ignoring the fact that there were two separate registrations there in front of them. So they literally allowed her to vote a regular ballot, and she had to write an affidavit. But the bad news is she told us She said, I feel so bad because there were all kinds of people who were with me who they told the same thing to. Those people didn't call us. Those people didn't hear us. Those people didn't get the vote because when they went back that Wednesday, they probably got laughed at because there is no Wednesday voting. So after Election Day, folks, it never is. Don't ever fall for that trip. We were very upset with that. The other thing that we saw a lot of, I got a whole slew of calls from voters around the country, mainly young voters, who were trying to register and vote the same day in states that didn't have same-day voter registration. Only 23 states allow you to same-day register and vote on Election Day. And sadly, these people were calling from all over the country looking for the ability to register and vote that day. And Daryl, we saw, so many problems that there were at least, to my count, at least 10 orders around the country, including in Georgia because of the bomb threats, and other states that extended voting hours to allow people to vote because their polling places had been closed, not only due to the bomb threats, but as I mentioned, to the machine failures. We will compile a report of everything we found. We will educate folks about this. We will, encounter and engage with these boards of elections to make it better. But we want you to know, everyone listening, that we are on the case. We do not give up. Right, Daryl?
Absolutely, Barbara. Not only do we not give up, but as we learn about the incidents, we're going to dig in, and we're going to go. We're going to lift them up so everyone can see them and see what it is. My old law professor used to say, "Pull back the sheets, turn on the lights, so you can see what's in the bed." And that's what we need to do. We got to know. We got to know what's laying next to us or what's laying in the bed that you're thinking about occupying. And so, TJC is going to be in the process of turning on those lights and pulling back those sheets so we can see the bare naked truth of what's going on around us in our society. But, Barbara, with that, I think that, part of what we wanted to do was certainly to talk about, the racism, that seems to be.
Before we get to that, but before we get to that, let's, give people some of, I know we have guests who are on, but our orders a show, the next thing is we wanted to just give people some of our top takeaways from this election. And it's important that people listen to this, because we're going to talk about a couple of things you haven't heard. You've heard all kinds of stuff, all kinds of alleged, polling data, exit data. But remember, folks, everything you're hearing right now is junk. You don't have precise data on who voted and how they voted until the official voting files are rendered by the states. That hasn't been done yet. They still have, weeks to go before they do that. Some states are still voting and still compiling votes, if you can believe it. When I say are still counting votes at this moment. So the official voting files aren't out. And all this, quote, data, what people heard from voters as they left, none of that means anything until you get the official data. So that's the first thing we want everyone to know, that we don't know who voted, how they voted precisely until we get there. What we do know is that there were 9.9 million less Democratic votes this year than there had been in 2020. What happened to those? Who are those 9.9 million? What happened to those ballots? Why didn't those people vote? Why weren't they present? We have to get to the bottom of that. And that is, I think, one of the biggest issues out there. The other thing, Daryl, I wanted to say as a top line, observation is that I want everyone out there, because I've heard a lot of people, are depressed. A lot of people are angry. A lot of people are just still confounded, confused about what in the world happened with this election. And I want to tell everyone that the most important thing right now is to hold tight to your faith. Hold tight to the understanding that our commitment to the righteousness of our struggle to fight for an inclusive, multiracial democracy is righteous, and we should never give up on that. It doesn't matter how people might be voting, whatever may have occurred or did not occur. It is critical for us to know that what we fight for, the dreams of our ancestors, the dreams for the future generations, that we have to hold tight to that. So, I used to tell you to go into that mirror every morning and look at yourself and say, I am a voting rights champion. I want you to go into that mirror every morning now and say, I will be and I am a democracy defender. And I want you to know that, because regardless of the 74 million that voted for Trump, or 75 million, I believe is the count at the moment, that voted for Trump, and people, remember, we're nonpartisan. So I'm just talking about the vision of hate that underlies one campaign, and I'm not trying to tell you how to vote so it's not a partisan comment, but we know that there are 84 plus million people who are out there fighting for an inclusive democracy. We got to understand that how people vote for candidates doesn't necessarily mean what vision of this society they actually support. Some actually, voted, strongly because they have a very negative, view of our nation, and they hate other people, and they're motivated by racial hate. But a lot of people voted because of other issues, and we got to understand that. We got to understand the misogyny, the anti-woman vote. We got to understand all of that. But I want people to know that what we believe in is, in fact, righteous, and we got to fight for it. We will not stop fighting for it. Go ahead, Daryl.
Thank you, Barbara. And, one of the top-line observations that I would also lift up, you talked about the 900,000, perhaps 900,000 plus, fewer Democratic voters in 2024.
9.9 million. 9.9 million.
Right, the 9.9 million fewer Democratic voters than in 2020. I think that we also have to take a look and understand, some of the factors that would weigh into that, and that being, the 1,000 state legislative seats that were flipped from pro-voting seats to not pro-voting type of seats. I think we also have to take a look at what it meant for all the voter suppression legislation that went across the country. And then when we start putting that along with the bomb threat that occurred election day, putting that along with, those other suppressive tactics that were used, that then we can begin to understand the battle that we face and the depth of the challenges that we face in terms of getting people to the polls and able to get their vote on it. It's just incredible. And Barbara, as Terry O'Neill, the former president of the National Organization for Women, put it, we're not talking about just the abortion issue and how people voted, right, pro-life, pro-choice, because we know that 8 of 10 states that had the abortion access on their ballot. Then 8 of 10 of them, it passed, but the candidates that supported or that were more pro-choice were not then the ones that received that vote. So there's something that's at play that goes beyond simple the policy pieces of this. I think, Barbara, that you certainly put your finger on the nose of it when we talked about the misogyny, when we talked about the racism, and that's what we're seeing that this election process really shows. Barbara, one thing that gets me, and I've heard Bernie Sanders say this, and it's supposed to be, the stalwart on this point, talking about how his party had left the working class vote on the table in terms of middle class. black folks are working class last time I checked.
I know, it pisses me off, yes.
Come on now. You know, we need an honest assessment. We need an honest assessment of what's went on here, and look at this racism, look at this misogyny, and figure out a way to deal with it, Barbara.
Yes, and folks, you know, we are the Transformative Justice Coalition. We will be bringing you, you know, some town halls, some other, you know, opportunities to really, you know, assess and understand what happened. We are looking forward to that official voting data so we know precisely what the stats are telling us. We're not going to get out there just lying based on, you know, what people want to believe. We're going to talk about it. But I, you know, just want to say when people are saying, oh, the problem was identity politics by the left, I want people to realize that the entire MAGA is an identity politic. What are you talking about? You know, so I just, you know, I find it, you know, fascinating how bad and political analysis can be in these moments. But one thing I do want to say with a bunch of love, because I want to spread some love out there. I want to spread love to every person who got out there and helped someone to vote. I want to spread love to all the groups who deficit spent in order to help people vote. I want to spread love to everybody who knocked the door, everybody who put up a door hanger, everyone who sent a text, everyone who got on the phone and made a phone call, every rally, every person who came to a rally, every person who walked the streets and passed out literature, everyone who encouraged folks to participate in this democracy. Thank you. Thank you. More than, there were 1.1 million voters in Georgia who were African American, an increase of over, 400,000. Give credit where credit lies. Look at the victories that we saw. The elections of 2 black women to the Senate. The elections of more, Congresspeople of color to the House, the election of more, progressive mayors. Elections, of a new, good governor who follows another good governor in North Carolina. The elections all the way down. Let's look around and look at everything. We mentioned the 8 ballot initiatives. I mean, all of those good things. Let's, look at what people did, but let's remember that this is one election. The beauty of, electoral politics is that no one election decides everything forever. It is our job to right now, we start thinking about 2026 and those midterm elections. And as some people will tell you, next year, Virginia, next year, New Jersey, next year, there will be elections. We will be ready for those. You can bet the TJC will be on the case, right, Daryl?
Oh, absolutely, Barbara. We're on the case now. We're going to stay on that case.
There you go.
So Barbara, what should we be doing now, Barbara? What would you like to do next? How do we move forward?
Well, what I want to move forward is I want to call for opposition to all the Project 2025 nonsense that they're going to try to put forth. I want us to be focused on Vision 2026. Let's, fight every one of those things. This mass deportation, folks, don't be out there celebrating any attempt to, quote, send people home. They're going to make mistakes. I had to represent a young lady, black lady, who was sent to Colombia, the nation of Colombia in South America, because she got caught up in a deportation sweep. And poor child didn't know how to call home, had no money, ended up in the, internationally, deported. They're going to make mistakes. There's going to also be, nothing but hate. They're going to do a lot of hate mongering, a lot of, untruths about, crime and all kinds of stuff, trying to make people just be hateful and caught up in that drama. Don't get caught up in it. Oppose it, because I will assure you that if they come for one group in the morning, they will come for us at night. Don't be ignorant. Don't be misled. Don't allow people to try to take your your focus away from what counts. I want us to constantly say every time they talk about they're going to deport somebody, we should oppose it, but also we should also be saying, and how many jobs did that create for people? Did that make your minimum wage go up? Did that make your housing go up? Did that make life better for you? We got to be on that. Hey, guest, somebody's talking. You need to mute yourself. We can hear you. So we need to oppose hate always. So, Daryl, why don't we bring in our guests, huh?
Sure. Barbara, who would you like to bring up first?
All right. Well, why don't we introduce our amazing guests that we have with us, because we never stop being joined. Yes, there you go. So we want to welcome to our show 3 amazing guests. Dr. Karen McRae, you know her. She's been on several times. She's the president and CEO of Concerned Black Men of America. Hey, Karen, welcome to Igniting Change.
Hey, Barbara. Hey, Daryl. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We also want to bring up Professor Ernest J. Quarles. He is one of the most amazing thinkers in this country. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and he's a member of the African American Policy Forum with the mighty Kim Crenshaw. He's one of their board members. Hey, welcome, Ernie. How are you?
I'm great, Barbara and Daryl. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, Dr. McRae.
All right, and we want to bring up one of the major leaders. Oh, my goodness, what he has done for the state of Maryland. I want to bring up Charles Snowden, who is the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders. He's a former civil rights director for the Office of the Maryland Attorney General and former Annapolis City alderman, and he is a person who has put his eyes on fighting hate. So thank you, Carl. Welcome to Igniting Change.
Barbara, thank you, and Daryl, and thank you for what an incredible, enlightening program. And thank you for the comments you made in terms of people understanding the struggle continues.
All right now. Yes, I've seen, these, Karen, I know, and Ernie and Carl, we've all seen people saying, I'm going on vacation for the rest of my life, and y'all got this, I'm through. Folks, that's not the way you fight. That's not the way you win. If every time we came up against, opposition, if every time we lost a race we should have won, if every time we just said, I'm out, I'm through, and I was doing this for y'all, come on. We do it because we do it for righteousness, but we also do it for our people. Black women suffer from these policies. The black family will suffer from these new Project 2025 policies. Black men will suffer from Project 2025. The nation will suffer, and the globe will suffer from these misguided, ugly policies. Don't get it twisted. We didn't do this for some other group. We did this for the future of our people and the future of all people. Don't get it twisted. I'm just, it's easy to get misled by viral videos that sound so hip, so sweet, so good, and that the anger is there and we all feel it. But folks, that's not the right position to be taking, because if Harriet had said, I'm through, if Sojourner had said, I'm through, if Frederick had said, I'm through and I'm out, come on. It never would be where we are. So I just had to make that comment, Daryl. Forgive me. You know how I am. Daryl, let's start talking about the hate.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Barbara, following and during this election cycle, I think it had to be one of the most racist-driven elections that I think I've ever been a part of or ever witnessed, as well as a lot of the misogyny that we've seen. But, the question now is, does it now just dissipate, or what happens with it? Carl, I wanted to lift you up on one of the incidents that we know of that have occurred post-election. So could you share with our audience what you understand to have happened?
Yeah, Daryl, we got a call, and this is probably not unusual for people around the country. Most people know about the text messages that went out to students and how racist it was for cotton. But something happened here in Annapolis that was a little different. A man, and I'll make this very brief, a man was in line at a Home Depot, and all he was simply doing was buying a product. It was called a wrench, a pipe wrench. And standing behind him was a man who was clearly supporting Trump. He was dressed in his red hat and his red sweatshirt and so forth and so on. He was so close to this guy that the guy turned around, who happened to be black, 67 years of age, and said to this white man who's in his 40s, "Sir, would you mind backing up? You're in my personal space." And the man, without hesitation, called him a nigger, and they went on to say, we won this election, and before it's over, you're going to be in the back of the line. Obviously, that caused a great controversy, to say the least. They got into a shouting match. The police was called, and the long and short of it was the white man was not arrested. The black man was going to be arrested had it not been for the intervention of a white woman who saw the whole thing, because the white man accused the black man of using this pipe wrench to threaten him. And that's the kind of attitude I think that exists. People are feeling very, very tense at this moment. Tonight, Daryl is going to be part of a discussion that's going to take place in Annapolis. We're inviting people from the metropolitan area, D.C. and Maryland, to come together and answer two questions. The first question is, what happened? What did people think happened in this particular race? And then the second is what Barbara was talking about. Where do we go from here? And I want to just make these 2 points and then end with it. One is that people my age will remember clearly where they were when Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. And when he was murdered, many people of that generation thought it was all over. Where do we go from here? Our leader has been taken. And then people who are younger will remember 9/11. Same thing. People can tell you where they were when 9/11 happened. And the two questions was, what happened, and then where do we go from here? So tonight we're looking at pulling together people to answer those two particular questions and to be able to talk very seriously about where do we go from here. Last point. People listening to this radio program should know that in 1972, a similar phenomenon took place. Unexpectedly, Richard Nixon won, at that time, the largest electoral vote and popular vote in the nation. And a lot of people were feeling bad because the only group that did not vote for Richard Nixon in great numbers were black people. 2 years later, their vote was vindicated. I'm convinced that in the long run, the nation made a mistake with Donald Trump. I do not believe he will complete his term, not because he's going to resign, but I think he's dealing with some mental health issues, which will become very, very clear as we go forward. So I remain optimistic like you, Barbara, and I know where the power comes from. So I'm just hoping that people will understand this is not an end, but a beginning. And the battles that we're going to be facing over the next 2 years will, again, call for people to be able to take a stand and to fight back.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And let us talk a little bit more about this incident, because my understanding is that this white racist who was terrorizing this older black man, the white racist folks, he was like 40 years old, right, somewhere in that area. He was husky, tall, and was looming over this smaller, older, slim black man. And, threatening him. And, what's interesting about this incident, folks, is nobody came to the black man's defense, right? Nobody said, hey, stop that, to the white guy. They just let him rant and just, use the N-word just unseasonably. And I understand, Carl, that he actually said, you niggas just wait until January 20th.
That's true. He did say that. Barbara, I should also mention that, unfortunately, unfortunately, the man who was the subject to all of this had a mini stroke after the event and wound up going in the hospital where he remains to this day. So these are very serious.
So, folks, we know, from those racist texts to this incident, and I have other incidents that I have heard of around the country, that we have something to deal with. Dr. Karen McRae, you help people to understand, the mental health dimension of dealing in this and operating in this racist, misogynistic, anti-woman, culture. What do you want to say to people right now? What do you want to say to people when they encounter these hateful folks and when they are put upon? Because it's been happening on airplanes, it's been happening in stores, it's been happening on streets. What do you have to say to people? Because it's going to get worse, especially if they do this mass deportation and hate is in the atmosphere and being fed and fueled all over. What do you have to say?
Well, Barbara, I'm going to preface this by saying that, I still have my New Jersey residual, so I try to keep that in check. So I'm not necessarily the right one for this, but I will suggest that folks keep your head up no matter what. If you can walk away, walk away. Don't engage, because you'll not be given necessarily the benefit of the doubt, as we can see from the gentleman in Annapolis, where the police were going to the white guy's aid versus the black man.
Yes.
So I think we need to keep that in mind. I also think that we also need to focus on the wins. Certainly, we did not get the presidency, and feel the way you want to about that, but don't wallow in it. Get back to work. I looked upon it. I am concerned, but I am not moved by what occurred. I look at Cleo Fields getting the other seat in Louisiana. Yes. I look at Shamari joining Terry Sewell in Alabama. I look at the entire ticket in North Carolina. I look at the Sister Bynum flipping a seat in Oregon. I look at all of those wins, and there's many more to speak of, and I take solace in that. And that is what fuels, my mindset, quite honestly, because I'm like, all was not lost. We didn't win the presidency. We know that HBCUs are on the menu, and what we have to look at, if we give up, then not only will we won't be at the table, but we're going to be skewered as a result. We cannot give up. And so that's how I view it.
And Daryl?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and Professor Quarles, we're having this discussion, and you're on the college campus at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, and so some of the students in the state of Maryland certainly were the recipient of some of these racist text messages telling people to report, to go to plantations, to pick cotton, and all this other stuff. What should we be doing? What should we be doing as a community? Watching, we listened to what Brother Snowden laid out that happened to the senior that was in the Annapolis area by a stronger, younger person. What should we be doing, and how did you respond when you heard the story?
Yeah, thanks so much, Daryl. Yeah, I mean, that particular story resonates obviously very strongly with those of us who lived through the 60s and basically walk daily in this space and place called America. I don't know, I'm sure I know at least since the election, in my encounters with white individuals in the airport, in the train station, on the street, I've been able to pick up and feel in passing, in glances or looks from white individuals, a clear, emboldened, and empowered sense that they have post-election. It's something that I should say only a person of color knows, because we feel, in quote, their stare or glare every day. And this stare and glare is much different than that which we typically have experienced.
Truth.
And wow. And Ernie, you study, you teach and you study, our nation's racial, history. And when you look at this, what do you want to say, to those young people who you will be, teaching in the future? What do you want to say to them? Because I know there's, massive confusion. One thing we found out from the AAPF research that was done, that a lot of our younger African Americans, especially Gen Z, do not have the same sense of urgency and understanding about racial injustice as even the millennial crowd had.
Right.
So what do you want to say that we all ought to be doing to deal with this?
Gotcha. Great point, Barbara. 2 points. One, the elevation of humanity is something that Black women have been at the forefront of since the late 1800s. And that's something that all of our young people need to know and understand. If they go and open their passports and they see the only quote by a woman in the U.S. passport, Anna Julia Cooper, and begin to do some research, they will begin to understand that on a higher level. Number two, my experience in Georgia with Darrell and with CK and with you from the National was with the John Marshall Law School students was just absolutely amazing. And young people need to know and understand that these students demonstrated investigative skills on social media platforms beyond one's imagination.
Yes.
Many times uncovering problems at polling places before even local administrators of those polling places knew about certain problems, from bomb threats to late opening of polling locations, to the late arrival of election supervisors, to campaign literature violations. These young people were actively involved in this process. And that gives me hope that these will be the future leaders who will preserve our democracy. And young people need to know that because right now they do, in fact, feel that they have nothing to gain. They have nothing to benefit from in this system and in this country right now. But they are clearly an integral part of election protection and of the protection of our democracy.
Well, and
go ahead.
And Carl and Karen, when you hear about what Professor Quarles is laying out about really the younger voters perhaps being necessary, right? The ingredient, the stitch that could really bring democracy into full fold and full view. Do you have a response to what Professor Quarles? I really call it a challenge that he's putting out there for these younger voters.
Karen, you want to go first, or you want me to?
Sure. One of the things that I would suggest is that we coalesce around speaking to each other versus at each other.
Thank you.
We need listening sessions. I know we're going to try that as an organization and find out exactly where the people are and let that be our guide to how we re-engage. Another thing, we're more divided than ever. There's see that, but one of the things I do believe we need to do is be clear about the media's involvement in the results. Barbara, you and I have often talked, I've been consistent with giving media an F over the last several years, and in particular around this. But I think when you live in a world of 24-hour news cycles and folks spewing out lies, we need to tell our young people, as well as everyone else, about trusted sources within our community to listen to and engage with. And even though, we heard in 2016 and 2020 that our community was targeted, quote, with surgical precision with disinformation and other things. We need to take heed to that and be mindful of who our trusted sources are and communicate that to our young people as well, too. Don't believe everything that you hear. Do your own research.
Also, I want to add something here, Daryl. I think that Black parents, Black people, that we need to talk more to and with our young people about what's going on racially in our nation. We struggle with this all the time as parents because we don't want to discourage our young people, so we don't want to tell them, what we've encountered, what is the reality out there. But that's not helping because they're on social media and they're being bombarded with a whole lot of nonsense and lies. And if you're not, helping to talk with them and to help them sort through what they're hearing, then they have no other choice often but then to believe what they hear. And I think that's been a real problem, the lack of, communication. Everybody's, quote, so busy. You better stop being so busy and talk with each other because that failure to interact, that failure to talk is showing. Don't just be concerned with what, I know, and I've seen parents who all they do is, they're giving their kids money, just thinking about what they're going to be wearing, what they're going to have, the material things, and not thinking about the engagement with the mind, and giving them opportunity, the young folks, to teach you what they are hearing, what they learn, what they know. I mean, there's just not enough interaction. That's a mistake. It's a deadly mistake if we continue on that path. Daryl.
And Barbara, I think that Carl Snowden wanted to weigh in on that as well, if I heard correctly. Carl?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I would just simply say this. I guess I remain optimistic because I think I understand our history. Every generation, there's not a generation that's been born in America who's not had to rise to the challenge. I am delighted, to be honest with you, where we are, because I know that, as Muhammad Ali once said, if you dream that you beat me, you better wake up and apologize. The reality is our people, when you give us challenges, we deal. And I just want to just remind people listening, we've been here before.
Right.
Keep reminding people our history. There was a time in this country, the Supreme Court, the Congress, the president, the law enforcement officials, they were not allies. What I like about the election that just occurred, for me personally, but it's crystal clear, when George Wallace ran for governor of Alabama, he said segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. So every single person who voted for George Wallace understood what they were voting for.
That's right.
For me, it's a clear analysis. White people and blacks and Latinos who may have voted for the eventual winner heard him. He talked about deporting people. He talked about insulting people based on their race.
Yes.
He talked about black women in a very negative term.
Yes.
White people who voted know what they were voting for. Let's not be confused. It had nothing to do with no inflation, had nothing to do with any of those other issues people want to bring up. It had to do with race. And it's a good reminder where we are. So nobody's now not clear-eyed as to what needs to be done. And quite candidly, one of the things he just announced, he being the president-elect, is he wants to institute stop and frisk across the nation, give police officers once again the authority to stop people. We know what happened in New York. We know what happened across the country. But what they forget is what young people did. Had people forgotten George Floyd and the response that young people all over the nation had? I think people are but to open up a new sleeping giant. And lastly, I have a granddaughter who just lost the right that for 50 years women had, the right to reproductive freedom. And despite what states did across the country, there are still problems in the nation where women are going to have some difficult problems getting this issue. This is personal now. And so I think that as people understand what 2025 is about, understand the need to struggle, we're going to see this huge response. Remember, the largest demonstration in the history of America took place following Trump getting elected the first time. People have forgotten the women movement and how many women showed up in great numbers following that. So I suspect that we're about to go into 4 years of intense activism that we've not seen in the past, and we look to young people who will come up with new tactics and new ways of addressing this. Just imagine, if you will, the man I told you about who was 67 years old, who was faced with this 40-year-old guy saying that. You have any idea what would have happened had he not faced a 67-year-old man, but a 27-year-old black man in America today?
He wouldn't have tried it.
It's a different world. It's a different world. And so I am very confident that, as Dr. King once said, only when it gets dark enough can you see the stars. And we're about to see some stars shining.
And thank you for that. Thank you. I also, folks, we have talked about two instances here of hate crimes being committed by, one, the bomb threats and the racist texts. I just want to remind everybody that those came from foreign sources. Mm-hmm. That was foreign interference. That was Russians. That was who knows where the racist texts are coming from, but we know they're coming out of the U.S., that they're not from people in the U.S. They're being bounced through international servers. Folks, this fight against fascism, and I know, one thing we learned from this election is a lot of people don't believe that. They don't even know what the word fascism means, which is something we'll take on in a town hall, and we'll delve deeper in that. But you do got to understand that there's a global movement of hate, and a global movement to try to, turn this United States into a cauldron of hate. It is our responsibility to fight against that we're not just fighting the domestic races, we're fighting the international races. And we know that Steve Bannon has, gone and hung out with a whole lot of them in the past. And that we know that he and Stephen Miller, who was just appointed deputy advisor to the president for domestic affairs, we know that they come out of that movement, that's who they are. And so let's, folks, be determined. Let's, folks, do what we got to do. I love our guests. Thank you so much. Daryl, I know you got to take us home on.
All right. Thank you so much, Barbara. I want to thank Professor Ernest Quarles for being with us today, Dr. Karen McRae for being with us today, and Carl Snowden from the Caucus of African American Leaders for being with us today. Look forward to being with you this evening in Annapolis with the caucus meeting. Folks, please, if you don't do anything else from this show, be certain that, number one, you pray. Let's pray for that victim from the Home Depot beating that had in the hospital. Let's pray for him. Let's also pray for the strength of this nation and the strength of all of us. Let's remember that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is younger than the victim of the mini stroke from that Home Depot. Is younger than that. It will turn 60 years old August the 6th of this year. Folks, let's get out in the streets. Let's be certain we get registered to vote and get our votes on when it's time. This is the time to hug your loved ones, to gather together as a community, and to be determined to not be deterred. Be determined to be certain that your rights are respected. Be determined to be certain that those that are elected will hold your values and will listen to your issues. This is not the time to put your head in the sand and wait for it to go away, because just remember this, just because you don't put your neck out doesn't mean your throat won't get slashed. You need to be certain that you see what's around and get out and get involved. Go to those community meetings. Get involved in that political community, that political outlet, whatever it is. Move forward in terms of representing the interests of the African American community, young people throughout this nation, and let's be certain we get our vote on. Folks, until next Tuesday, noon, Eastern Standard Time, we're igniting change here on the iconic WOL FM radio, AM radio. Peace, everybody.
Peace.
The preceding program was paid for by Barbara Arnwine